Hey everybody, welcome to another Stuff Sketched with Gregg Schigiel. I am Gregg Schigiel, the person speaking right now. What you're seeing on your screen is a drawing I did when I was probably in 5th or 6th grade of a character named Rescue, based on that G.I. Joe action figure, Lifeline, who has the word rescue written on his leg. This is another drawing of that same character that I did, I think in 1990, so I would have been in late middle school, early high school. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to redesign this character from my childhood. This is a inspired and challenged by my friend Jerzy Drozd, one of the hosts of the Lean Into Art podcast videocast that you can find on YouTube. They do a weekly show, mostly live. Jerzy Drozd and Rob Stenziger, and they have done something like this, and I was talking to Jerzy and he suggested I do the same, so I'm doing that. What I'm starting with here is a basic structure. I tend to, when I'm doing some design stuff, I kind of like the Bruce Timm styled body shape just as a mannequin to lay in some designs. So that's what I'm doing here. This is being drawn as usual digitally on a Cintiq, Wacom Cintiq tablet, and this is sped up about 3 times. 3 times the normal speed at which I was drawing. So this is me just building, again, a template upon which I'm going to start working out designs. So in approaching this, my instinct is to draw the character that I created and just do a recreation of it. Like, how would I draw this better now? But the challenge is to reconceive the costume entirely. So the first thing I'm getting rid of on the original Rescue is that long plume of gray hair that was coming out of the top of his mask, clearly inspired by Firestorm at the time. The premise of the story was that he had lost an eye, so he had his long hair to cover that eye. I was reading Dolier's book of Norse myths around that time, so that was also an inspiration. So for this, I'm going with something like a bicyclist helmet. Years ago, I was playing with, just for the fun of it, redesigning the Flash's costume, and I was playing with some ideas like that. Didn't work, but I think in this case it kind of does work. It maintains the look of the hair that I had when I was a kid, but modernizes it, makes it sleeker, does not create a weird wind resistance issue that that long plume of hair would create. So I also toyed with the sort of white cross symbol that I ended up using as I refined the character in middle school and high school. I still think that works. So for this design, I'm going with the same thing, but tweaking it. If it ain't broke, right? Now the gloves, the original gloves were big sort of gauntlets. Again, if we're actually considering functionality of these costumes, then maybe there shouldn't be that much extraneous stuff, the big gloves and the buccaneer boots. So I'm going to try and address those things. So here, what I was going for is trying to see if I can manifest that first aid cross symbol on the gloves. So here I'm trying to see what it would look like if it covered the 2 fingers. But the problem I realized was you only really get to see 3 prongs of the 4 parts of the cross. The part that goes over the non-thumb side of the hand. What do you call that side? The pinky side? Like, that doesn't quite play the same. So if nothing else, you're seeing me draw different hands. But it's a bit of tinkering here in that regard with respect to how the hands will work, or how the gloves will work. It's an interesting experiment rethinking about this character, because to me, in superheroes, I like the costumes to be fairly simple, fairly clean, something you can redraw more than once, not too many extraneous parts, like superheroes to look like superheroes. So this what I've done is, while I was drawing it, I looked up an ambulance online just to see, on a separate device. I looked up an ambulance to see what it would look like if there was anything I was missing. And the ambulance has obviously lights on it. Aside from the lights that sort of flash, there's lights along the sides and there's rectangles based on the image I was looking at. So I put those rectangles on his arms as sort of a nod to how an ambulance functions. And there's me drawing the other ambulance symbol, like the actual ambulance symbol, and seeing if it worked on a glove. It didn't. So yeah, Rescue is a speedster superhero. I don't think I said that at the top, but he's a speedster like the Flash or Quicksilver or whomever. So he is, and his name is Rescue. He's there to, he is like a human ambulance. Now the boots, I always like the look of Buccaneer boots. Again, if we're getting functionality into this, which is dangerous territory because it is superhero make-believe, but I like the bulkiness of the boots. So here I'm playing with the idea of maybe some kind of high-tech running apparatus, something that has some tread on it. Again, if we're playing that game of making it work. This is... So then I hit on this thing. I'm like, oh, what if the fingers... So obviously this is all in black and white, but I'm thinking in terms of red and white. So what if you had these wristbands and the fingertips were white against a red glove, and I'm moving the ambulance pieces around, and this is kind of the process that I go through in terms of designing costumes in general. Trying different stuff out. It really, the digital aspect of it helps in that you can really tinker quite a bit, try different things. But there's so now I've settled on how the arms will work. It'll be like the lights, but it's more attached. It's just part of the costume. It's not like a protrusion. So that's it. I was satisfied with that, and now I'm gonna draw it in action. Actually apply this costume practically, and do a drawing of Rescue, a character I have not drawn in a good while. A little part of me is a little torn that I'm not just drawing classic Rescue in his classic costume, but that was not the challenge. Rescue is a character I talk about when I do school visits, when I talk about my creative process. I show that original drawing with the action figure and talk about how, and I've talked about this on this very video show, how I'd reconceive of my G.I. Joe figures as superheroes, and Rescue was a big one. Rescue was a character I drew, again, through high school, from elementary school. But the challenge was to draw the character. So I can tell you right now, and you'll see me adjust it, but Rescue's left arm there, the forward arm, that's too long an arm. I mean, it works. Again, I try to draw these things relatively quickly so that I don't have to speed them up too much so you can actually see what's happening. But yeah, this one, that arm's too long, and I'll fix it. In hindsight, I think I should have drawn actual tread on those boots. The way Mike Ringo used to draw the boots on the Flash. But spoiler alert, I didn't do that. Decided to go with the open hand run, sort of the track and field run, as opposed to the fists run. I don't know. I think it has like there's a sleekness to it. It's a different kind of run. It's a run for speed, right, versus a run for power, or something. Now you'll notice. So now I'm knocking that back, and now I'm going in and I'm inking it. I still have not corrected that arm that I think is too long. So that's something that happens with me, is I'll start working, and then in the next phase I can make those corrections. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. For this, for these videos, for the sake of efficiency, I already do enough redrawing and drawing and redrawing, so I try to speed things along. But you can already see, like, based on how long his right arm, his right bicep and shoulder are, that left one is severe. And here I notice his hand is way too big, so using digital technology I can shrink it. Otherwise I'd have to erase and redraw it. Can you imagine? Astute viewers will notice I did not apply the fingertips to that hand. The only excuse I have is I literally just designed this costume, so the details are maybe a little lost, and I already moved the reference out of the way. So it happens. But like I said about catching the arm in the inking phase, I'll catch that. I'll catch that glove. You'll see. This is pretty quick and dirty inking. Arguably, you know, one could argue whether it's actual inking or if I'm just cleaning up the pencil drawing underneath. Fair enough. I use inking just as a catch-all term. It is a pretty simple costume when it all comes down. And really, what I mostly changed were the gloves, the boots. Obviously, his head is pretty dramatically changed. But I don't know. I think the costume way back when, back in 1990, was pretty good. Now, I was going to draw his streaks behind him, and then I realized that there's something I can do digitally that will make the streaks cooler. Easier, cooler, more refined. So now I'm applying color, hoping that my design plays out. Colors are pretty simple. Red and white, I'm keeping to that color scheme. When I was looking at pictures of the ambulances, I did see that there are other colors on an ambulance. But again, for the sake of cleanliness and clarity and simplicity, sticking to the standard colors that people associate, at least in the United States, with an ambulance and a rescue squad. Red and white. So now at this point, I noticed the fingertips, so then I just I made it happen in the color. See? Told you I'd catch it. I don't catch everything, but that one I caught. Normally I do coloring in Photoshop. So some of the interface on the coloring in Clip Studio. I'm using Clip Studio Paint here. Isn't stuff I entirely know, but I was able to make it work. These shadows are not terribly well considered. I wasn't really thinking of light sources and just trying to define some forms. So if you're noticing that things aren't quite following any sort of, the light is coming from X and Y, that's why. I wasn't paying attention to it. I was just winging it. I tend to lay in flat color and then put shadows. Some people like to lay in a dark color and highlight it. That's all. Matter of preference, obviously. Sometimes it depends on the color. So now here's what I can do digitally. There are these perspective rulers in Clip Studio Paint, and I use them occasionally just to create some kind of system where I can just lay in shock lines or speed lines and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm doing here. And it keeps the line straight and along the right perspective lines that I'm looking for. Obviously, if I was doing this on paper, I would just use a ruler to do it. But in this case, I'm just using the tools the technology allows. And that is the redesigned rescue. Not too shabby. Hope you enjoyed this little experiment. That's about all the stuff I have left to say. I'll see you next time.